L'incontro con l'altro è anche incontro con Cristo. Ce l'ha detto Lui stesso. È Lui che bussa alla nostra porta, affamato, assetato, forestiero, nudo, ammalato, carcerato, chiedendo di essere incontrato e assistito.
Welcome to episode 3 of our series on the spirituality of unity of the Focolare movement. Chiara Lubich and her companions realized that love was the heart of Jesus' message. They discovered a new quality of love, different from what they had known up to then. Loving God meant rolling up their sleeves and concretely loving each person that crossed their path.
If we look at Jesus with the eyes of little children, we can see that basically he asked only two things, which are ultimately one. That all people, everyone, black and white, rich and poor, ugly and beautiful, all persons are children of the one Father and are brothers and sisters to one another. If we are all brothers and sisters, we must love everyone. We must love everyone. Look, these are just a few words, but they are a revolution.
This emphasis on recognizing and loving Jesus and each neighbor turns our way of looking at people inside out. As we've seen, it's a love with many nuances and qualities. For example, it does not exclude or limit itself to one's family or friends, but loves everyone. It doesn't distinguish between pleasant or unpleasant, beautiful or ugly, young or old, someone who is my nationality or a foreigner, black or white or Asian, Democrat or Republican. You can see how living this quality of love alone could potentially drive change in today's polarized society. Dick and Shirley Marquis, from Tucson, Arizona, have been married for over 50 years. Before their wedding, they realized something about each other that risked ruining their relationship.
In the parking lot of the grocery store one time, this woman approached me and she says, why do you have both Republican and Democratic signs in your back window? Can't you make up your mind? And so I said, no, my wife is Democrat and I'm Republican. And so we put both signs up.
Yeah. We didn't talk about politics. And being from Massachusetts, which is a strong Democrat state, and I thought Maine was where Dick is from, and I just assumed that he was a Democrat. It wasn't until after we became engaged that I realized that he was not of the same political party. And I thought, okay. It was really too late to turn back at that point.
It wasn't a big deal at first. I wasn't active. But then after we were married, I became active in the Young Republican Club in Maine. And it wasn't until after that that I realized that she let me know how strong a Democrat that she is.
So we had some wonderful conversations. And at that point in our lives, I think we were really strong in trying to convince the other to accept the party that we were involved in.
Well, I think that we both realize very strongly that the important thing is our relationship. And because of that importance that we place on a relationship, we can listen to each other and accept each other. Don't have to agree with each other, but we accept each other for who we are.
Now, Dick likes to watch a certain news channel, and I like to watch a different news channel. His news channel is very Republican focused. Mine, Democrat focused.
You want to look at money management?
So what happens is we watch both. When we're watching the channel he prefers, I've stopped, groaning or, going, oh my goodness, and because it's really not being respectful, and it's really not truly listening to what the other person is trying to say, and to try to understand, a case of trying to walk in their shoes in the way that they're thinking. I'd like to say that it's easy to do that, but sometimes it isn't. I feel so strongly about issues, but I realized that issues isn't the main focus in our relationship. It's really the relationship. To give up my ideas sometimes, I'm not saying to water down what I believe, but not to make it an issue.
Our children are pretty much split in their political views. Both parties are very well represented by our children.
We've learned how to talk to one another, and occasionally it gets a little bit out of hand, and Dick and I really try to bring back in our family gatherings, how relationship is the most important thing. Matthew 25 is very important to me. The disciples ask, Lord, when did we see you hungry? And when did we see you naked? And Jesus says, when you help somebody that's hungry, then you're doing that to me. And it has to be the same for me with politics, because I can't pick and choose how I want to live my Christianity.
Another quality of evangelical love is that it doesn't wait to be loved, but takes the initiative, the first step. This small, but no doubt difficult step has the power to recompose relationships hardened by years of resentment. But in fact, that's how God loves each of us. He doesn't wait for us to love Him, but loves us first, regardless of our response. Love is also concrete. It favors walking in the other's shoes, understanding their thoughts and concerns, sharing their joys and sufferings, thus making ourselves one with our neighbor. Evangelical love has another quality, recognizing the presence of Christ in the other. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus said, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. A stranger, and you welcomed me." How beautiful, yet difficult. How often do we really manage to see and love Jesus in our neighbor?
Have you ever noticed that on an abandoned road, when it is caressed by springtime, grass appears, life comes forth? The same thing happens to humanity around you, if you look at it through the divine ray of charity. Supernatural love in your soul is a sun that causes a reflowering of life. Nothing else is needed to uplift the world, to give it back to God.
Another quality of love is that it is ready to love enemies, to pray for them, and to respond to offenses with forgiveness. There's an Indian proverb that says, "While the axe chops the sandalwood in turn scents the axe with its fragrance." Layna experienced this firsthand.
I had a wonderful childhood, but at the same time it was very challenging. The relationship between my parents had always been difficult, and they were always on the verge of separating. As a child, I idolized my father. When he was with us, he made each of us siblings feel unique, and he looked for ways to show us his love and care. But I also observed his disrespectful behavior towards my mother. I was at an age where I could understand what was happening, and it was becoming harder for me to reconcile my love for my father, because he was causing my mom and the entire family so much suffering. It was during this period that I started attending meetings of the Focolare movement. We would talk about the gospel and its application to the various situations in life. Loving my dad became a daily choice of conscious acts of love. For example, I would ask him how his day had been. I would listen to him and sing with him a song that he liked. All this because I wanted to love Jesus in my father. Because I knew, despite everything, God loved him. My parents ended up separating for good. I remember that when it happened, I prayed to God. My biggest worry was about his soul. I asked Jesus not to let him die without having the chance to reconcile with us and with God. We lived a couple of very difficult years. My mom, who hadn't worked for a long time, had to find a job to provide for the family. In those years, my dad formed a new family, and his contact with us decreased. It was hard for me to fight resentment towards my father. The frequent gatherings with the people of the Focolare gave him the strength to continue loving my father. I used to write letters to him, telling him how everyone was doing. Other times I would call him on the phone, since he would rarely reach out to us. 10 years had passed since my father left home, when he contacted me to share that he had a very aggressive type of cancer. In that moment, the woman with whom he lived during those years had left him, and he was alone. My brother and I knew that in this difficult moment, God was asking us to see Christ in our dad and be by his side. One day, the doctor came to us with the news that there was nothing else that could be done for him. My mom had also started to come to visit my dad, and she was present when we received the news. My dad asked her if he could come back home, and she said yes. We cared for him until his last days. During this suffering, we could see the love of God towards our family. We were able to talk about the things that had happened to my dad, which paved the way towards reconciliation. He asked for forgiveness. He also asked us to call a priest so he could make his confession. He also received communion. This was for me a miracle unfolding in front of my eyes. Our family was touching the power of God's love. My dad passed away peacefully 6 months after that. I felt that God had answered my prayer as a child. Not having my dad die without being reconciled to his family and with God.
This journey we're on may simply seem too hard or too long, and the destination too far. His cry of abandonment on the cross is our light in times of distress and darkness. We'll look closer at this aspect in the next episode. The journey continues.